A 10 hut and a great Friday to you all out there in TBG land. And of course, welcome to the MyRacehorse viewing party. We've got an exciting race today, of course, with Tizamagician on the heels of some experienced efforts yesterday from Big Mel on debut, Son of Quality Road, and of course, Lane Way, who inches back on his way to a graduation, hopefully sometime very soon. I'm going to wish every one of you out there a happy and safe Memorial Day weekend. Of course, to those who have fought for those freedoms that are here today, and of course, no longer with us, we thank you, as we know that our freedoms are not free. Well, without further ado, I want to welcome in the usual suspects, as you may remember from last week. Of course, we've got Hannah Bloom. Hannah Bloom, of course, with the social media aspect of things with Grand Slam, social, and of course, Joe Moran, our racing manager here on the West Coast and abroad, covering it all from coast to coast. And Joe Mishak, well, he's our racing operations manager. I'm sure many of you have spoken to Joe Mishak from time to time on varying subjects, whether it be just how this whole microshare thing works, or perhaps how's my horse doing? And I guess that's the bottom line. How's Tizamagician? And welcome to the show. Hannah, how was your week thus far?
It was very good. We've had a good week for MyRacehorse so far. I know we had deep cover sell out, which was really exciting. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be back on the live show.
All right. And Joe Moran, of course. Joe, I know that you've been covering it from basically stable area to stable area. A little difficult, of course, with the COVID-19 situation, but that's what they made the cellular phone for. And I know we're very excited about today's race. Tizamagician, race 8 on the card. A Globetrotter of sorts, 16,000 miles he traveled. Unfortunately, could not compete in the Dubai World Cup card, but he's back, and it's never too late to think Triple Crown. What are your thoughts on that, Joe Moran? Are we dreaming here, or is this a possibility?
Well, I think you're always dreaming it when it comes to the Triple Crown, but he couldn't have returned better to America from Dubai, and he's went really right on with his training, and the Mandela camp can't be happier with him. So I think we're locked and loaded today, and he's going to run a big race.
Well, he's been dispatched at 2-1 as your morning line favorite. As I'd said, a field of 10, a first level allowance, condition claimer, optional claiming. There are a couple of horses in for the tag, including the rail horse El Huerfano, who could be a nemesis there at 5-1. He's earned over $500,000 in his career. Well, we're going to have plenty of emails, questions that come in. Feel free to present them. Hannah will present those questions, and either myself, or Joe and Joe can answer those. Well, we wanted to get into last week and what took place, of course, with two horses that ended up being in the same race for two Hall of Fame trainers. Lane Way, the experienced one, coming in for Richard Mandela, and, of course, the other in Big Mel. And again, wouldn't want to go any further without giving a salute to Mr. B. Wayne Hughes, of course, for the partnership with Spendthrift, and some exciting times, of course, for their stallion into Mischief. But let's go back and take a look at the replay of that maiden special weight that took place a week ago. And this would be Lane Way, drawn to the outside, and Big Mel on debut under J.C. Diaz Jr. as we roll the tape here. The one thing that I acknowledged, and Joe Moran, Joe Mishak, feel free to touch on this. You see Big Mel, who broke so sharply. Many asked, why did he drop back, or did the rider take back?
Moves into second. Twirling Derby is racing in between.
Well, Nick, I think if you go to the 19-second mark of that clip, as you mentioned, he does break very well out of the gate. And then as number 5, Ray comes over and cuts in front of him, that's the very first time Big Mel experiences what kickback's like. In workouts, he's always been on the outside or the inside, working heads up with the horse next to him. And this is the first time a horse has just got in front of him. And quite frankly, I think, the opinion internally here is, that gave him a little bit of, hey, what's going on here? This is the real deal. That's the way, I interpret it. And obviously, as he comes running on at the end of the race. He didn't throw in the towel, but I think it did take him some time to figure out, this is different than what we've been doing in the morning.
Well, I think the other point, the fact that Bob Baffert brought up the next day that he's not a quote-unquote sprinter. And I mean, we're so accustomed to the Bob Baffert horses winning first time out and being by Quality Road. Immediately you think 2 turns and mile beyond potential. I mean, Quality Road himself could get 1.25 miles, and 1.8 miles could be his comfort zone. But Joe Moran, you brought up an interesting point the next day. And, we tend to parallel horses and forms. And, of course, it's always great to mention a former Triple Crown winner. But the likes of Big Mel, tell me about the Beyer speed figure that he earned on debut and compare that to another horse that we're well and familiar with.
Well, yeah, American Pharaoh, first time out, ran a very similar race. They were both finished 5th, beaten similar margins. And the Beyer speed figures came back, I believe off the top of my head, was only 4 points off. So, it really shows you that a horse can gain a ton of experience out of that first race. And it really is a learning experience for them. Like Joe Mischief mentioned, when they work, they work heads up with one other horse. When there's 10, 11 other horses next to them and inside and outside of them, it creates a whole new ballgame.
All right. And in regards to Lane Way, Joe Moran, what was the wrap-up as far as what Rich Mandela assistant son Gary, what's the next step for him? And I'd say on a report card, if you were to give him a grade or based on their input, what would be Lane Way's grade on that effort?
Yeah, well, surprisingly, they were very pleased with that effort. I mean, I think we can all kind of agree that based on his body style and what we've seen from him, 5.5 furlongs probably isn't going to be his long-term, A game. So, from a grade, in my opinion, I think they gave him a strong B+ in that effort. I mean, he tried the whole step of the way. Ultimately, it would have been nice to finish second there, but he ran a great race and he came out of it good. Most importantly, Richard is very excited to give him a test on the turf. It's kind of something that we've talked about, and he really thinks he's going to flourish. So it'll be interesting how the next condition book comes up, whether the race is going to be a mile, a sprint. So when it comes to that factor, we'll have to wait and see how that next condition book comes up.
All right, so we're not real sure about what the next race will be. Will it be 2 turns? Will it be grass? Will it be sprinting? Will it be dirt? Will it be turf? We're not real sure, correct?
Well, we're pointing to the turf next time out, so that's guaranteed.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to say guaranteed, but that is the plan. There is a turf race going 2 turns on May 30th in this condition book, so that's where they kind of want to see what that next book looks like. Are they going to offer 2 options, or is there going to only be 1? So you may be forced your hand there, but ultimately we think the turf's going to take that notch up and hopefully get that W like you talked about earlier.
All right. So as far as Lane Way is concerned, both horses came back physically in good order. In my experience, I would say that Bob Baffert likely come back and sprint Big Mel one more time. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. And that's kind of what he said in the video. Long term, as you mentioned, he did say he thinks his ultimate success will be 2 turns, but still he wants to give him a little extra ground from that sprint. So whether that's 6, 6.5, that will be determined from the condition book.
All right. Well, it sounds as if both horses came back in good order. And, as I had stated yesterday, or last week when you were on this show, it feels like yesterday, we may have lost the battle, but we haven't lost the war. And the one thing I can truly say, in looking at a lot of the posts out there, the pages on Facebook for both partnerships, I think for the most part, very optimistic. And being optimistic in times that we've been enduring over the course of the last 60 days has not been easy. But horse racing, I'm sure Hannah can attest, Joe and Joe can attest, is the best sanctuary to get yourself back to means of being spiritually happy. But all right, wanted to get into some emails, obviously messages out there in Twitterverse, and I wanted to throw it out there to the folks. Love the commentary that we got last week and the statements made, but feel free to send us along your questions, and one of us 3, or perhaps even all 4, will try and come with the right answer. Hannah?
Yeah, so we see this question from Victor. Esparza, I'm not sure. I'll answer it. I'll pass it off to one of the Joes possibly. But why do some horses wrap their front and back ankles? Any advantage or disadvantage for the horse during the race?
All right. Well, I could answer that, but I'm going to go ahead and relay it over to Joe Moran, knowing that his father been involved in the game for several years. And just a side note that I actually trained for his father. So I've known Joe since he was very small. And in fact, I probably had him put a polo bandage on at one point. So Joe, short and sweet of it, bandages, not so much the positive or negative, but why are they used?
Well, I mean, they can be used. I mean, coming from an athlete myself, I think of it as an athlete taping their ankle for a football game or baseball game. It's very similar to that. When you see horses, you'll most commonly see horses with back wraps. And I was going to kind of touch back to you if you wanted to touch on a few points where maybe an instance you would see as a trainer, you would see those front wraps come more into play.
Well, again, I think they're there for support. Obviously from a claiming perspective, bandages can be placed on a horse as a kind of a camouflage to throw people off if, in fact, they didn't want to lose their horse via the claim box. But in the eastern tracks and the deeper tracks, sometimes in the south, you'll have horses that tend to run down and they'll burn their heels. So the bandages are there for protection. So they don't actually burn. It depends a lot on conformation, also soundness, because if horses front load, they tend to put more pressure on their front limbs, and in turn, they'll run down and burn. But a lot of it is support. Horses may have arthritic ankles, and horse that might be a weak pastern type individuals. That's the primary reason for those front bandages. I, as a horse player, not a fan. Hannah?
Yep, we have another question from Dennis Newman. What does MyRacehorse look for at auctions? Is there a price limit? Do we want the seller to maintain interest like in Deep Creek? Joe Mishak, I believe this will be a great question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic question, and it in like a lot of racing questions, it all depends. In a partner like Twin Creeks Farm with Deep Cover, for example, Nick Hines, myself, and Joe Moran were at the Ocala March sale, and we talked to Randy Galat at Twin Creeks, and he expressed that, of course, primarily my number one job is a breeder, and that's where most of my time goes. But I really like this horse a lot. I've had success with his family, his half brother Vince Ramos, and his stallion Mission Impossible. So guys, if you buy this horse, I would really like to come in. So that's kind of how those sort of relationships works. And also, as many of you know, that we're very closely involved with the Great Spendthrift Farm. And we bought another horse there. We worked with their team to come up with Mischief, who we all think very highly of.
Yeah, and by the way, that name, of course, Deep Cover, so the folks don't get confused. The relationship there with Twin Creeks goes in, as you can see, Deep Creek, but Deep Cover, and we'll actually touch more on him as we proceed a bit here. Hannah, obviously the big question, and this game can be so kind of a bit imposing, intimidating in sorts, and getting involved and owning a horse, just like owning a sports franchise. How does it go, and what do we need to do in reference to being involved with MyRacehorse? What's the step process?
So I'd say the best thing is MyRacehorse, they make it very easy to access it. If you follow us on Instagram or Twitter, Facebook, you should if you don't yet. And by going onto the website, you can just click a link to the different horses that are available, and you decide how many shares you want, and you hit buy, and you go from there. So I think this is another great question from Shauna Lynn. If I'm looking to become a new owner, is it better to buy multiple shares in one horse or a few shares in many different horses?
Yeah, I personally, I think we talked about this last week, and Joe, feel free to chime in, but I'm always one that I like to kind of hedge my bet. As much as I like particular pedigrees, the last thing I would want to do is say invest in one horse, and I made a decision between that one versus the other two, and the other two, one ends up being a champion. The middle one made its money back, and the one I bought ended up being, someone's riding horse. So it's the odds, right? I mean, obviously, if you can cover your chips on the table and play an extra hand. I'm not one to give advice, but I like to have strength in numbers. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. It's all about, and as a trainer, Nick, you as an ex-trainer, you can attest to. We can think the most high of any horse in our barn, but they're very, they can be very fragile. Things can happen in the stall. They take a minor injury. They're 6 months off from the track. And you're kind of sitting around. You're going, man, I'm getting bored now. Whereas if I spread across, multiple horses, the odds are, you're going to get some good action. You're going to hedge your bet, just like you said.
Hannah?
Yeah, we have another one from Jeff Evans. Are you working with any bloodstock agents to pick these horses out? If not, who actually makes that decision?
I can partially answer that. Obviously, I kind of work from an advisement standpoint. I wouldn't deem anyone, and Joe Mishak, you can answer this completely, but we are obviously comprised of a group per se. I advise from hey, if we're going to a sale, we'll go through short list. In particular, I'm more about the athlete in particular, but at the same time, we have to have pedigrees that match. Joe Mishak?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Nick says, Nick's a part of our team. I head up our acquisition team, and Joe Moran supports it. We also work with some bloodstock agents as well. It's a very collaborative approach to how we pick horses out. Just like I mentioned for Spendthrift Farm, we worked with their team down at the sale and said, all right, you guys do your homework. We'll do our homework. We're going to sit down at the table the night before an auction and see, are we landing on similar horses? What's the benefits of teaming up here? Or do we go our own ways and pick on, they pick their horse, we pick our horse. But a lot of the times, when we're buying into these very nice colts, that we're going to end up on a lot of the same horses.
Right. Now, I think the other touch on that would be horses of racing age. When we're going to go try and acquire privately and team up with, say, for example, a Spendthrift. They may have had a runner that we want to get involved with. Street Band is probably a perfect case in point with the Joneses and the Medallion Racing. I mean, that obviously was presented to us through Medallion and TaylorMade in that association. So the good news is that I see it with MyRacehorse. It's highly diverse. It's not secular in a sense that, obviously you see the Spendthrift brand working its way through. But as far as the horses and involvement, we're involved with several different partnerships as it may be, and even more so, I think, as we go forward. All right. Well, as we move on to the next subject, keep sending those questions in, thoughts, commentary. Of course, Tizamagician. That is our horse of interest today as part of that late double at the Great Race Place. Victor Espinoza back aboard for our Hall of Fame trainer. Tizamagician hasn't raced since February 1st, but not by design, considering that trip that he took to Dubai and then the cancellation of the Derby. He's back, and he's back in a big way, let's hope. All right, want to go on for the future. And I know that there are a couple of horses that took a road trip today, and Joe Mishak can tell us all about it. We've got a son of Tappet and a daughter of Munnings. Where are they headed?
So it's graduation day from the perspective of getting them out of Ocala and heading up to Keeneland. So both Solar Strike and Joyful Addiction got on the van this morning. And hopefully, should arrive later tonight or early in the morning hours. And as you can see here, Solar Strike taking a spin down. He's just this nice, obviously, very impressive, growing into his body, nice son of Tappet. Everyone knows he was kind of a little he was a true Tappet. He was shown that he wanted to play around last fall. And as he's progressed throughout the spring here, he's really grown into himself, both physically and mentally. And I know a big question was, why didn't he go to Churchill a couple weeks ago when Churchill had reopened? There's kind of a phased approach where a lot of the trainers that were setting their barns up at Churchill had just kind of horses that were ready to race and ready to run. So we decided to leave him down there for a few more weeks until Steve was ready to bring him up to Keeneland, where he'll get probably a month or 6 weeks of training under Steve's assistant, and then head over to Churchill, where he'll be ready to probably start breezing 3/8 by then. Both these horses, Joyful Addiction and all the horses down in Ocala, have been steadily breezing quarter miles. They typically don't, and they'll gallop out 3/8 of a mile. They typically won't go that much further down at the farm, just because the crew down there wants to get them, in one piece to their trainer and not push them too hard as they're progressing. So Joyful Addiction also headed up to Brad Cox's barn at Keeneland, and probably around the same time frame, give her a month or so to get over to Churchill after that.
Ultra exciting. I mean, the fact that I'm sure Joe, you could attest to what a year Munnings has had thus far. So with Joyful Addiction headed to Brad Cox, Solar Strike to Steve Asmussen, who, by the way, won the opener today at Churchill with a 2-year-old and did it the right way. A son of Cantheros. Then a bit later on in the card, actually spoiled another with trying to recall that name of the Chad Brown second timer. Was it Center Isle? Is that her name? She didn't quite run to expectation, but Steve Asmussen was able to get multiple wins on the card. So that's a great update. And in reference to those two, when will we expect to see those horses on a work tab, Joe Mishak?
I would say, generally these trainers like to give them a couple weeks to settle into the new accommodations, get out on the track, get their feet, out on the track, get them comfortable. I would say, 3 to 4 weeks here to probably start breezing 3/8.
I love that comment there at the bottom of the screen, Kyle Heiress. He said, do you have any suggestion how to brag to my friends that I've got the best horse in the world? It's quite simple. You're in with MyRacehorse. That's all you need to know, Kyle. And, obviously, as we are here on social media via Facebook, Twitter in particular, this is your opportunity to brag about who you own and whom you are involved with. So, all right, so those two horses are on the road. And want to thank Raul Reyes of King's Equine. Does a tremendous job. And he truly is a character in his own right and keeps the horses in good health. And he's established a long-line relationship with B. Wayne Hughes, and in particular, a horse by the name of Beholder. I'm sure you all remember that great champion that we saw often on the racetrack for Richard Mandela. All right, now let's progress. So those two are on the road in process of going into training. We've got horses that are actually in training. So I'm going to go back here to Joe Mishak and with the likes of Mo Mischief and Lady Valentine. How are these two, and what's the progress report?
Todd Pletcher, we're at Palm Beach Downs, getting ready to watch.
We'll watch this video first from Todd Pletcher. He sent this earlier this morning of Mo breaking from the gate.
And has a red and black helmet cover. So he should be ready to come out pretty quickly today. It's him on the outside. Left there.
Well, no doubt he likes to be in front. He's got speed. And, considering the fact that he was just purchased out of the March sale, we're roughly, 10 weeks since buying him, and he's already looks like a gate card to me. When horses race for the first time, they actually have to get an official gate card. It's like a certificate, like a driving permit before you can get your driver's license. So I like the way he broke. What's the latest and greatest, Joe? Mishak?
Yeah, so obviously we bought him mid-March, and we gave him, about 40 days off, just kind of customary to give some horses some downtime. It's like, if you're a football fan and watching the NFL Combine, that's what those athletes go through. We want to give them a little bit of a break, and our partners down at Spendthrift Farm, Seth Simkin, who we work very close with, gave me a call about a month ago and said, hey, Joe, this horse is rear and ready to go, and we need to get him down the tide. So he's been there for a few weeks, and obviously has been schooling very well. And we heard from Todd today that he'll breeze 3 furlongs on Sunday.
Wow. So they're the grass, safe to say the grass is growing under his feet. And as a son of Heiress Mischief, one thing I recall the most integral part of his game is the psyche. I was pretty impressed with his overall aptitude, but looks very sporty, of course, with some sprint presence on the dam side. All right, so that is an update on Mo Mischief. What about Lady Valentine? I'm excited about her. She looks like a horse that time will definitely help her cause. But what's the latest on her?
Yeah, I think definitely she'll get better with time, but she also looks precocious. When we saw all the 4 fillies down in Ocala earlier this year, that I thought that Joyful Addiction and Lady Valentine were kind of the more precocious of the bunch. And of course, that doesn't mean they're going to be any better or less than the other ones that might develop later. But Lady Valentine also down to Todd a couple of weeks ago, and she breezed a quarter-mile earlier this week, actually, just nice and easy. And listen to Todd there.
Gallop this morning. Big scopy filly on the outside nearest us. Lovely way of going, great attitude, good disposition.
Yeah, wow, she looks very light on herself. I will tell you that. And just for clarification purposes, both the two Todd Pletchers there, Lady Valentine and Mo Mischief, are at Palm Beach, correct?
Correct.
All right.
So she'll be working also another 3/8 here in the upcoming week. So moving very nicely for Todd.
All right. Well, that's the duo there with Todd Pletcher, and couldn't be more excited. It sounds like Mo Mischief is humming right along. Joe Moran, I know that obviously being out here on the left coast, you're awfully very close to the Mandela camp, which is a good thing. And of course, today with Tizamagician going a bit later today, the reports have been very favorable. Clock reports have been super. So that's a good sign. We'll get into that. But tell us about Moonlight Doro for Richard Mandela and what the current latest and greatest is there.
Yeah, so Moonlight Doro actually had her first breeze a little bit earlier than we all expected on Monday the 18th, and she went a quarter in 24-1, and the camp was really pleased. As Joe was kind of mentioning, Lady Valentine being ahead of the game in Ocala, Moonlight Doro and being by Medaglia d'Oro generally are later developing horses and get better with time. So, we weren't sure how long, when Richard got his hands on her, how long it was going to take to get that first breeze under her and everything like that. And they said she just settled right in. And so far, everything just went great with her. She handled the breeze well. She went in company. I believe it was another 2-year-old colt by American Pharaoh by the name of Magic Man. And so far, she's just done everything well. So, it's still a little early in the ball game to give any ranges, but so far she's just going to stay right on schedule, kind of stay on that weekly workout pattern. You will see, if you watch Richard Mandela, kind of how he handles 2-year-olds, sometimes he's not afraid to bring them back 5 days later in a work. Sometimes he'll give them 8. So it kind of just depends how he thinks they're feeling and how they're progressing. So we'll see her move right along.
How long has she been in training at Santa Anita?
At Santa Anita, she got there on the 10th, so she went to the track on the 12th, and she worked on the 18th. So she's only been there for about 12 days, so that's why they were very pleased to get that first work right away.
Yeah, no, that just major credit going out to the program. And, obviously patience on display, but, when these horses give you the sign they're ready to move forward, and going back to Joe Mishak and his statement in reference to Lady Valentine, for me personally, I look at the pedigree, I say to myself, wow, she's going to be a great fall horse. But don't kid yourself. These horses will fool you, and especially the talented ones, because just like those athletes that, they kind of want to get out there and do it now. Looking at the Medaglia d'Oro, by the way, you couldn't stamp a horse much more than that on Moonlight d'Oro. She looks like a horse that'll fancy the 2-turn game, and we know of that Medaglia d'Oro filly that Papa Mandela had trained. So let's hope. All right, so getting into some other commentary in reference to questions that may come in, I lastly want to touch on a horse that I'm a huge fan of, and that's Deep Cover. We saw the message earlier on today in regards to how this process works and what's the mindset going into Deep Cover. One thing I can appreciate, when we purchased this horse, MyRacehorse came on to buy this horse with Spendthrift in March, was the fact that he was a May foal. And in my eyes, Joe, we were all there together, and the presence of this horse's mind, his walk, I actually liked the fact that he had a little bit of femininity to him. He wasn't too masculine. The one thing I've come to find with the Mission Impossible line, they tend to be a bit too masculine. They're more difficult to keep sound. But here's some video footage of him at Windstar Farm, and Randy Goulat of Twin Creeks has had a long-standing relationship with the folks there. So, we talk about our program. Yeah, it's very diverse. But Joe Mishak, would you like to add on Deep Cover and your thoughts here?
Yeah, no, it's just been very nice to see him get along. I know that Randy was out at the farm about a week ago and was saying this guy really wants to get on with his training and go do more. So we kind of just got to be careful and take our time with him. But in Todd we trust, and is kind of the word. So I'm sure he's been in contact with the folks up there, and we'll probably see him in Todd's barn here probably in another month.
Well, I think the point to add to that is that the fact that we kind of gave him an intermediary step. Randy is well familiar with the family, as you alluded to. Of course, he himself campaigned Mission Impossible with Todd Pletcher. So you would think that if it's all said and done here, the breeder, former owner of Mission Impossible, with a horse that he has had hands on since birth, essentially, he would know very well what is truly and best for this individual. So the little baby step forward to WinStar before graduating into that Pletcher program, much like we saw with a Solar Strike and, of course, Joyful Addiction, this is the progression that we look for. And hopefully when it's all said and done at the end of the year, we look back and go, wow, we made some winning moves. I hope that we'll be saluting from the winner's circle sometime very soon. I know it's hard. It's difficult. We're fans. We like to get out there and get to the track. I'm a big fan of getting out in the mornings. Unfortunately, it's not allowed. It's not acceptable. But hopefully within the next 60 days, start seeing some light here at the end of the tunnel. So that's our horse, kind of our encapsulated what we have to look forward to. And guys, I appreciate the work and diligence, and let's keep that positive momentum going forward. All right, I want to bring Hannah back in. And before we do that, last but not least, American Heiress. Joe Mishak, what's the latest on her? She is still down in Ocala, correct?
I'm going to kick it over to this guy, Joe Moran.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Joe?
American Heiress arrived in Ocala just about 20 days ago, maybe 25 days ago, and she's done well. She's got into Raul's program, Galloping, and he says he sees a lot of American Pharoah. Everyone said he was such a smart horse, and he sees a lot of that in her. But she also creates a little bit of stubbornness, so he is taking his time with her and getting her on the program. And hopefully in about 2 weeks she'll have her first quarter breeze with him, and then just keep progressing from there. But so far, you can tell she's gained a lot of fitness from first leaving Silver Springs till now. So definitely progressing well.
All right. Well, it definitely looks like a horse that will appreciate that time and kind of get her mind and attuned. But it tells me she's going to probably be feisty even more so as she gets fit. I want to remind the folks, I know you're tuned in to watch Tizamagician hopefully work his way to victory. And in race 8, we're approximately 8 minutes away from race number 7 out there at San Anito. So we welcome back in Hannah. Hopefully you enjoyed your little break there, and I'm sure you had an opportunity to go through the questions that are out there. What do we have?
I'm trying to weed through them right now. Just a lot of excitement, of course, for today's race. And then we also have Vertical Threat tomorrow at Santa Anita, so a lot of people are excited about that. This is kind of a current question with what's going on in today's world because of the coronavirus, but Michael says, with COVID, racetrack are cutting purses. Do you see it affecting prices on upcoming auctions?
Ms. Shack, I'll defer to you on that one.
Well, I know a lot of the auction houses have done, and Nick, you can also attest to this, have done a lot for folks that are uncomfortable traveling to the auctions. They've done a lot of videos on their site that you can review, confirmation shots and walking videos. And OBS has put together a pretty strict protocol for folks coming down into town. They're limiting access to just the people that are coming into town to buy horses, limiting fans from really coming in, putting in other safety protocols. So we're pretty confident that there's going to be a healthy appetite, especially since we only had that 1 2-year-old sale. We've gone a couple months, and a lot of people out there didn't have the opportunity if they weren't shopping at the March sale to go on. So I think naturally you'll see a little bit of a decline probably in prices, but depending on where you're purchasing in the market, there could still be some healthy bidding going on.
All right, so Michael, just to answer the first part of that question, in reference to the purse cuts. Obviously, we don't have racing in Pennsylvania at the present moment, so no Penn National, Presque Isles on the shelf, Parks, no racing there. It has, in a sense, I think, affected the lower to mid-level because, as we all know, as I had mentioned, the claiming aspect of the game, without purse money, when you're a claiming guy, it's tough to get that churn going. So I think there's a little effect to that end of the market, but as far as the upper tier, I think the players will be there for the good ones, as Joe mentioned. In fact, we've only had one 2-year-old sale thus far. Hannah?
Yes, I'm still reading through. There's so many. I love all these comments. Thank you so much for writing in. I did see one with someone asked when Deep Cover's first race will be, which I thought it'd be good for us to all explain kind of how he just got into training. And so, Joe, I didn't know if you wanted to take the lead on that one.
Yeah, I think with any of these horses, it's tough to tell when their first race is going to be under a perfect situation where he continues his training without any type of setbacks. Give or take 90 days from now, so that puts us, or probably a little less. So that puts us probably around the August 1st time frame.
Perfect. Let's see. We have another question from Cassandra. Any plans for purchasing more horses at the auctions in the coming months?
Joe Bishak, that's a good question for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's all thanks to all you shareholders out there and those listening. Is we had a tremendous last week, kind of a record week for us, where you kept us all on our toes. You crashed our servers, and it was all good and fun. We got everything taken care of, hopefully, for everybody. But yes, we do plan on being active here in the upcoming weeks and being able to provide everybody some new offerings here within the next month or so.
There was a question actually in reference to this filly, and I'm sorry I jumped on that one, Hannah, but Jason Feynman in reference to Amandrea, with the whole shutdown of horse racing, in particular being that she's the grass horse. I know some people felt as if Amandrea got lost in the shuffle, especially considering the fact she was coming off a win. What's the latest on her, Joe Moran?
Yeah. So we just put out an update today. We talked to Steve earlier today, and she worked 2 days ago. She had a half. The great thing Steve was able to do was to keep her in training, so she was able to stay very fit galloping during this whole situation. So she really didn't lose much fitness. Lone Star just has kind of been releasing their racing schedule consistently as the days have progressed, and they're going to move to a Monday through Wednesday schedule. There's an allowance race that fits her on the 5th day, which is going to hopefully come up on June 2nd, and that's what Mr. Asmussen's thinking. So as long as she continues well from now till then, that's going to be the plan for her.
All right, well, that's good news. Jason, thanks for messaging in. James Hamill with an update, 35 minutes to Tiz. And James is one of the more animated shareholders out there, obviously very active in the social media world, and he's got himself, a pretty nice stable of horses. So thank you for that, Hannah.
Yeah, we have a question from Steve Taylor. Can you tell early on that a horse might be better on turf versus dirt? Sarge, I think this question might be great for you with your experience.
Yes and no. It's interesting because if you were to ask Bob Baffert, for example, that question, he would laugh at you because he'll be the first to admit when he goes to turf with a horse, it's like his last-ditch resort. I mean, I think he's only had a handful of real stakes, graded types that competed on the grass because that's not what he looks for, right? But I think that in reference to dirt versus turf, one thing you'll note about a dirt horse is they're more so precocious than a grass horse. Grass horses tend to be a bit more laid back, not necessarily grass sprinters, but horses that are kind of turf bred. They kind of have a different mental set than dirt horses do. Dirt horses tend to be a bit more forward. So I think you have to kind of judge personality where they're at.
Hey, Nick,
horses, for example, even in Big Mel's case, in retrospect, knowing how he got that kickback, and I know that there were a couple of messages that came in that said, hey, if he didn't have the experience with the dirt, then why did he run first time? He took dirt in the morning. I know that. But the morning and afternoon, Joe Moran mentioned this earlier, it's an entirely different set as far as how that works. So I think the turf versus dirt is kind of aligned to the pedigree, but it's a mental thing.
Yeah.
Conformationally, Nick, is there, when you're at a sale, is there indicators, whether it's the foot or the hind end, that would lead more toward this is going to be a turf horse?
Generally, with that in mind, I try not to like pigeonhole, but we always talk about platter feet, horses that have bigger, wider web feet that tend to be more turf types. So that's kind of the first thing you gravitate toward. But beyond that, I think as a general rule, I think horses that race on turf, I think they have longer refined cannon bones, and they have just kind of a different musculature, longer muscle tone as opposed to the dirt horses. With dirt horses, you see more shoulder. Grass horses, they're more refined. And do you have something you want to add to that? Were you thinking along those lines?
No doubt.
All right. Hopefully that answers Steve's question, and it's a good question. And obviously, the unfortunate aspect of trying to decide whether or not they're better on dirt or turf, well, they train on dirt virtually every day, unless you're at certain venues like Fair Hills up there in Maryland, where you train on a synthetic track. You don't have the opportunity, unless you might be a Bob Baffert or a Papa Mandela, to actually work a maiden on the grass. It's, in particular, geared toward horses that are allowance to stakes types with experience.
On that note, we have another question from Matt Frederick. I thought this would be a great question for those interested in getting involved in MyRacehorse, but could you explain how the payouts are determined to each shareholder? Say Piz wins today, what goes where? Joe Moran or Joe Mischief?
Yeah, so it does vary. So the winning race earnings are always divided equally amongst the shareholders. So in Tizamagician, I believe there's 600 shares. So it would get prorated across those shares. However, we do put a portion of those race earnings back into what we call a reserve account to ensure race earnings the bills, the training expenses are paid for the horse's career. And once we reach what we call a target level, we issue dividends out. And the reserve account is like an escrow account. Just because it goes in there today doesn't mean you won't get it. You'll get it at the end of the horse's career if there's an excess in there.
Very good. We have time for a few more, George?
Oh, absolutely. The 7th race is going off here now. So we've got a few minutes, so let's take a few more questions. I think it's great. And that's a great explanation, Joe. Certainly appreciate that. And, of course, it seems – when you think about micro shares and how the whole concept works, considering the fact you're coming in with, say, a couple $100, look, every gain for me is a gain and a positive. So, even if your return on a horse for an earnings is $1.50, you don't have to look at it like it's the end of the world. I mean, you can only hope that on the spendthrift opportunities they granted with Grade 1 Colts, a $6 million bonus, all it takes is one. And, this is a game that was predicated on chance and luck. So that is certainly something we'll look forward to. Hannah?
Ray Schroeder wrote in, news on Lazy Daisy, still eyeing Oaks points. We've had a few questions about Lazy Daisy.
Yeah,
Joe Moran.
I'll jump in on this one. I actually spoke to Doug O'Neill today. So the plan is very similar after she exited out of the fantasy. It was a great comeback race for her to really gain that fitness and experience. It was no easy spot by any means, not to mention going a mile and a 16th off the layoff. So many would say she needed that race regardless. She is going to be pointing to an allowance race at Churchill Downs. They actually wrote a straight 3-year-old filly race, non-3 for a purse of $81,000. Generally, if you were in California, you wouldn't see that condition written. So it's a great race for her to kind of take at. She does have the benefit of already having Oaks points. So the Oaks is nowhere near out of the picture, but she's going to point to that allowance race first, and then we'll go from there.
All right, that's good news. So Joe, just to clarify, Lazy Daisy, is she back here in California training?
No, she from Oaklawn. Doug kept a small string out there. They stayed at Oaklawn Park till they were able to move over to Churchill Downs, and then she headed to Churchill Downs.
Excellent.
Let's see.
And then just to clarify, that race for her is June 5th, just for those wondering.
Good, June 5th. Mark your calendars, Lazy Daisy, and that'll be a good spot for her. You know, look. Bottom line, you take a swing at that purse that was offered up at Oaklawn, knowing full well that she likely needed one. That's going to be a nice spot for her to reset, and then obviously look for a campaign this summer. The 3-year-old filly division, for me, just based on where it's at today, is hot. And I can tell you that if Lazy Daisy can get in that picture, I think the reward is going to be there when it's all said and done.
We have another question from Brian Perla. Could we get an update on Shared Empire as well?
Joe Mishak.
Yeah, so Shared Empire, as we've disclosed, just had a minor issue called a curb. So she stopped training down at King's Equine, and she's just going to rest for a few more weeks. And at that point in time, at the end of the month, which I guess is about a week now, she's still on schedule to go out to trainer Bob Baffert. But I think, Nick, it might be beneficial if you can tell the folks out there what curb is.
It'd be great if we had a diagram. But let's say when you're looking at a horse, okay, you've got the front and the hind. Essentially, you go to the elbow of the hind leg, which is where the hock joint is located. So in the hock joint, in the back of the hock joint, it's what is deemed as a plantar ligament. Now, the plantar ligament that attaches there at the bottom of the hock, sometimes it could be a minor slip that creates that. It could be a conformation thing. It could be just immaturity. But so the plantar ligament, some would deem that it's similar to having a tendon with a front leg, which I really can't tie those up because the plantar ligament, it's not real deep as far as length and as far as how it sets up. But it can be quite painful, but it's something that I think with maturity, they tend to heal up. As far as the diagnostics, the horse may be physically a little off. They could actually palpate where that plantar ligament is attached. But point being, they cool out quickly, and you have the options of freeze firing it. Some will pin fire, which I think is archaic. But all in all, 60, 90 days should well and take care of the issue. And I don't believe it'll be something that we ever look back on. No,
and being by Pioneer of the Nile tends to be later developers getting better with age. So, our folks that are, whether it's Raul down at King's Equine, if he feels she needs more time down there, we'll hold off on sending her to Bob. And once Bob gets her, he'll take his time.
All right. Well, I want to mention, I didn't want to interject there, but we are approximately 25 minutes to post. And at first click of the odds, Tizamagician is even money. That's right. He's even money off of that 2-to-1 morning line. And if you're a numbers person, he is lucky number 7. And Tizamagician, I personally think this appears to be a rather straightforward race for him, and one that on paper he should do better than just run well. I mean, the expectation is high. Joe Moran, you had an opportunity to kind of chime in with the Mandela camp. What's their take on today's race?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, I think he's kind of a straight ahead type of horse, and he usually has no problems with the gate. Victor's very good from the gate, so I think we're going to see him in a very similar position that we've seen in the past, and he'll be forwardly placed. He has a lot of good things going for him. I mean, when you're looking at his form, or a lot of people use different types of programs, I mean, he's going in the right direction. He has 4 increasing equibase speed figures, 3 increasing buyers. Granted, we had the little inconvenience of having to ship Dubai and coming back, but, he came right back into training. He's been training great. As you mentioned earlier, Andy Harrington had 3 back-to-back solid B workouts on him. So I don't think we could be asking for him to come back in his comeback effort any better. And there is some other speed in the race, but I think it sets up well for him. I mean, as you mentioned, El Herfano from the rail has possibly a little speed, and Bean from the rail is going to have to go take the 101, maybe the speed of the speed, and then a little pressure from the outside in Kyle Moore.
All right, we'll get more into the wagering aspect of it. And I think I saw someone flash across the screen and said they put $100 to win. Well, I'm sure my Racehorse Nation out there has affected it in a great way. And, of course, I want to wish our partners, Spendthrift Farm. You know what I found interesting? Now, when you look at this particular race, as far as the 3-year-olds, I'm noting that we are, one of 2, but it is kind of cool to see that Triple Crown logo next to Tizamagician, because usually you look at a calendar, it's May 22nd, 2020 or whatever year we're in, and you're thinking, the Derby's over. Not so fast, my friend. It's the first Saturday of September now. And, of course, we've got the Belmont less than a month away. So we can only hope that this will be the first step in that direction. It's certainly a possibility. Hannah, what do we got?
I saw a really good question a few minutes ago from Joanna Johnson. How many horses total are currently in MyRacehorse? So I thought maybe Mischief or Moran.
We're punching close to 40 right now.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
That's a great number, and obviously with the support, as Joe alluded to, I think that the concept of this MyRacehorse idea is really starting to kind of find its motion, so to speak. The trepidation to begin with, people would ask, well, why would I invest $200 in a horse when I can invest $2,000 to $5,000 and take a greater purse share? But at the end of the day, even myself, I run a small independent stable with primarily claiming types. If I can get involved into Mischief for a nominal fee, I'm in, because I know I can be part of the greatest party, and that's the MyRacehorse party. And of course, when we have the opportunity to get back to the track, we can all celebrate, win, lose, or draw. That's one thing I've noted about MyRacehorse. They are great partners to be involved with. And look, there are exceptions to every rule. We're all competitors, but at the end of the day, the horse's health at the end of the day is paramount. And we know a 365-day-a-year season, we fight to live to fight another day. All right, I want to get into that Tizamagician's replay. And wouldn't you know, he obviously started the new year off right, winning on New Year's Day. But let's go back to that win. And it took him, 6 starts to break his maiden. And Tizamagician that day being ridden by Victor Espinoza offers your 2-to-1 morning line favorite, and a field of 8 signed on.
Much More Halo completes the lineup. And they're off. Tizamagician is hustled out for the early lead. Don V has some speed. Here's Snapchap in between them, now rushing up quickly, moving to the rail, and Snapchap will be the pace setter. Tizamagician is now in second, followed by Don V, and Much More Halo fourth with 3 lengths to make up. Then it's Blue Jays, followed by Kiss Today Goodbye, gap of 4 to Divine Armor, and Midnight Luck at the back of the field. Onto the backstretch they go, and it's Snapchap, leading it by about a half a length. Tizamagician is in second. Much More Halo takes third, Don V at the rail, Blue Jays fifth, 3 lengths off the pace. 2 more to Kiss Today Goodbye, followed by Divine Armor, who's still right together with Midnight Luck. There's a half-mile left to run. Snapchap continues up top, in front by about a neck. Tizamagician trying to apply a little bit of heat into the far turn, and now Much More Halo makes a 3-wide bid. These 3 separated by less than a length. And now Tizamagician takes the lead. Much More Halo on the outside moves to second. At the rail, Snapchap has to dig in to keep up. Then Blue Jays fourth, 4 lengths off the lead. It's another 2 back to Divine Armor as they turn for home. Tizamagician has shaken loose of the top 2 and bounds clear to lead it by 3. Blue Jays splitting rivals from the back of the field. Divine Armor is also finishing strongly. Tizamagician with a commanding lead. Divine Armor moves into second late, but won't catch Tizamagician, who scores by 3. Divine Armor second. Kiss Today Goodbye finished third. Then it was Blue Jays in fourth and Snapchap fifth.
Well, there it was. That was his maiden win, and no better way to start your 3-year-old year than right in the winner's circle. And the one thing to note, that was his best speed figure that he had earned to date then. And, of course, subsequently would come back and actually run through that number with an 89 buyer speed figure in the Bob Lewis. And then 1,000 Words was a horse that was ranked way at the top before the likes of Nadal, Setting Stride, and Charlatan. So, yeah, I think Tizamagician, despite the time off, guys, I would say we can anticipate that type of performance today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of, before the show, I was talking to Joe Moran, and I said, I really do believe he sits the same trip that we just saw. I think he probably has enough speed to be in front if he wants, but I think Victor likes to, have a target for him. So I would expect to see a similar style race today. And with Tiznails, obviously, he's a horse himself who was a little immature as an early 3-year-old and missed the Triple Crown Trail, but came on strong at the end of the year to win the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to chime in, and kind of talking about that race a little bit. I thought Gary Mandela explained Tizamagician very well, and he kind of compared him to a Cadillac. He said, Tiz is that Cadillac versus that Ferrari, where he's not going to have that razor quick acceleration, but he's just that horse. He's going to keep that steady going all day long, really. So as Joe said, I think we're going to get a very similar trip to that race right there.
Well, pedigree definitely suggests that. Having a Tiznow that could race at 2 is one thing, but the fact that they have developed like he has, breaking your maiden to 6th career start is not the worst thing in the world, but it's the progressives and speed figures that we've noted. Thank you, Christine, for that odds update, 7-5. Hannah, have we gotten any other questions that came in that look interesting enough?
And not to get off track off Tizamagician's race, but we do have many excited about Vertical Threat tomorrow. So we do have some questions about what we think about that race tomorrow before we go to Tiz's race.
All right, so that was David Wood. Joe Moran, I know you've been in contact with the Baltus camp, Richard Baltus, son of Tapiture. He certainly is a specimen in his own right. How's he training coming up to the debut tomorrow?
Yeah, he's training great. I got to see a lot of him at San Luis Rey during this development time. Unfortunately, during the recent time, I haven't got to be there as much due to COVID. But Ruben Losa, who's the assistant trainer at San Luis Rey for Richard Baltus, really says he's just done everything right. And as you mentioned, he is that specimen. He's a big, thick, well-built type of horse. He's always presented speed to us, so we think he'll be able to handle it. Ideally, Richard Baltus did say he would love to have maybe 1, maybe 2 more works into him. But coming off those 2 gate work, he seems to be able to handle everything fine. And then looking forward in that condition book, the next race, which would have been, I believe it was June 9th or June 6th, was going 6.5 furlongs. So we kind of had to look at both races and kind of see which was going to suit him best. Tapiture, they seem to handle everything, whether it's dirt, synthetic, turf, a wet track even. They've proven that early on. So first time out, as we've learned, you kind of have to see it, and we're gonna see tomorrow.
All right, so he's in post position number 4 on debut. Post time 12:30 tomorrow, and I love the morning line odds. He's 12-1 for Abel Cedillo and the Irons. All right, we're going to send it out to Santa Anita. 13 minutes to post. It's almost showtime, folks. Tizamagician coming up here, and thanks for tuning in to the MyRacehorse watch party on this Friday.
To reel them in late. You go 2 starts back. He ran, I thought, a pretty decent 4th in a very challenging field, beaten by our Principe Carlo, Desmond, who would go on to win an allowance race at Oaklawn, and Galilean, who ran really well in another allowance race here the other day. The mile is definitely a question mark for him. He has run at a mile, and actually he's won at a mile, but it's been a really long time. So that would be the only drawback I have. From a level standpoint, he actually fits in here. If you were playing exotics, I wouldn't be completely swayed by him if you were looking at him at 99-1.
As far as the rest of the field is concerned, 7-5 favoritism here towards the 7. Tizamagician, I get it for Richard Mandela. I did put this horse on top, but as Tom Quigley mentioned, this is the kind of horse in a race that if you're going to try to beat the favorite, maybe this is the way to go.
Earlier on, we saw Hit the Road in his first appearance against Allowance Company be pretty dominant against older horses. Tizamagician looks to do something similar. It took him quite a while to break his maiden. He kept running into, horses that were doing really well. When he finally broke through, they put him directly into Stakes Company, his next start. He ran 4th that day, which is maybe a little bit of a disappointment. He has shipped to Dubai and shipped back in the interim, but this will be his first try against Allowance Company. It is older horses, but so far, Pete, at this meet, the trend has been the 3-year-olds against older. They are manhandling him. First collusion illusion, and that was another same situation. A horse that had been running in stakes, going to Allowance Company for the first time. Now it was Hit the Road. horse running in stakes, going to Allowance Company for the first time. Now Tizamagician, he fits the same mold.
Right.
However, this price is a little on the low side.
I would have to agree. I thought there were a couple of now defunct pick 4 ticket. I included a couple of them, and one of them was Kyle Moore, the 10. Gary Studi having a great year with limited starters, 20% right now from 20 lifetime starts so far of 2020. Not that it's lifetime. I don't know what I was saying. This horse came off a $25,000 open victory here on March 6th. This horse, I think, in the 4th try since coming to the Studi barn, the only race that it was kind of less than what you would consider competitive was the February 7th race, and the horse bobbled at the start and kind of lost all chance. So if you consider that, why wouldn't you include this horse? I think he's going to be right there off the early pace. You're getting what I do believe is a more than a fair number, 22-1. If you don't like him to win, I think you got to at least like him for the exotics.
I don't like him to win for sure. You know, you mentioned he kind of bobbled at the start, but he's not a good gate horse regardless.
He's had his issue.
And that race, he just kind of spit the bit. He's a horse I feel like needs to be up pretty close, or at least traveling very freely. And at this particular level, which is what that last race was that he ran poorly at, I think it's going to be a challenge for him.
Take the 101. I think we both discussed a couple of times now. I do like this horse, and I think you're getting what I think is a fair price at 7-1.
I'll take that all day long and take the 101. He's got some back class to lean on. He is a multiple stakes winner. Now, that was against Calbred, so I'll give you the asterisk, but he is grade 1 placed as well. So he does bring some serious back class when you look that far away. You know, coming back to the races, they tried him on the turf going long, and while he does have the one turf distance win, I still think that dirt is his preferred surface. So I really appreciate him getting back to the main track. 3rd start off of an extended layoff. I like that angle. And like I mentioned, that recent work in 47 flat, that's an excellent time. It was a bullet on the day. Handicappers report gave the A-, which is not an easy grade to come by. So for me, I think the take the 101 is where I want to try to land my money and make some money.
Horse is getting ready to roll. 9 minutes to post. 9 minutes to the 8th race, the Lake Daily Double. As a reminder, in the 9th and final, that will be the Golden Hour Daily Double. The last race from Santa Anita, the last race from Golden Gate Fields, $5 wager, and it has been playing very, very well thus far. 9 minutes to post. Race number 8. Good luck.
the track for today's 8th program scratcher number 5. Post time in 8 minutes.
All right, so we are back, and as you heard there from Michelle Yu, Peter Lurie. Peter's got us picked on top. Wasn't a big fan of 6-5, but you can call it the MyRacehorse effect, if you will, for Tizamagician, who looks to ascend through yet another level in conditions as he graduated 2 starts ago on January 1st, and now it's trying to get through maybe his junior year per se in high school. All right, also want to welcome back in the team, and we've had an opportunity to kind of peruse the form and take a look as we look at El Huerfano and as we look at the post parade here. Joe, on a side note, Joe Moran, you sent over an interesting tidbit. Tell us about track profile, because, you know, we did have the laps in racing at Santa Anita, and now that we've come back, has there been a certain trend for these route races as far as speed closers?
Yeah, exactly. So it was a stat that was run just on dirt route races so far since we returned on the 15th of May. There was 3 races last week that were contested at that distance on the dirt surface, and they were all won by horses that were positioned 1 too early on in the race. And then there was 1 race earlier today, which I believe was race 4, won by a Peter Urton runner, and he was positioned 3rd, but he was right alongside the top 2. So, I mean, you can definitely say there's a little bit of a bias of horses in dirt route races that are winning up front. So hopefully we'll be positioned right up there.
Now, and there is Tizamagician, makes a nice appearance, nice and calm out there on the racetrack. The one thing that I noted about this race is the pace dynamic. As you had suggested earlier, Joe, that El Huerfano might show some speed. I would expect the 4 off that 47 bullet, best of 42, which, as Michelle, you mentioned there on the simulcast, got an A- on the Harrington Clock Report, which is not an easy give, especially when you consider the fact that it's an entry-level allowance. But Tizamagician, his grades have been solid and nice across the board. I think he's going to set the perfect trip today. Wouldn't imagine him being that far out of it. So as we talk a little bit more about the handicapping, Hannah, have there been any other questions presented that that look somewhat appealing as far as what the folks are interested in?
No, just a lot of excitement, of course, as we get closer to post time. I'm trying to scan through again, but really just a lot of good luck, a lot of positivity and excitement. It's what we love to see for sure. So I will I will let you know if I find another question.
Well, I know there was one question that came through earlier, and that was in reference to the silks. I know that there were a few fans that were wanting to buy silks for their home. Joe, I know that you're involved, obviously, in the accounts department. So, Joe Mishak, what's the cost of getting a traditional set of silks done?
$300 per pair. So
Wow.
it ain't cheap.
But they'll last a lifetime if you never actually put them on a jockey in a race. You hang them up on your wall. But I'm sure they can mimic it. Certainly a discussion we could all have in-house as far as putting together some silks. And, you know, we also talked about potentially having some fun giveaways down the line, perhaps with some merchandise. Our friend Molly of Grand Slam Social, I want to give her and Shona a salute for the work done, along with Hannah. In reference to this being an optional claiming race, is Tizamagician in for a claiming tag? No, he is not. But when you enter into an allowance event, this is for a race for horses who have never won $15,000 once of the maiden, claiming, or starter. What that means, $15,000 to the winner at this level condition, you would no longer be eligible for. So if Tizamagician were to win there today, which we hope he will, he would then go to a 2-time allowance event. There are horses in this race. Joe Moran, El Huerfano, he's gone through this condition, I think, multiple times. So in turn, he has to run for the $40,000 tag.
Yeah, exactly. And you touched on that perfect. And you'll see that if you're looking at a racing form or a program, if you're at the track, you'll see on the form line or program that they'll have that claim price tag listed on next to their name on there. So that's how you can always tell if a horse is eligible for a claim. Same thing with Equibase, they'll always list that.
I want to get into the handicapping aspect of it. Joe Mishak, do you have a particular bet that you like to make? You know, in my eyes, 7-5 is a short price, but how would you How would you approach this race from a wagering standpoint?
Well, before we went on air, I placed pick 4 and a pick 5, single and Tizamagician, knowing that the value wouldn't be had in this race unless you were going against Tiz, which I certainly wasn't. So I'm live here, single to Tiz, and I got 3 in the last. So hopefully, last race I believe was a $15 winner, so I got some value there. In terms of playing the race straight up, I've always been kind of a trifecta kind of guy. For value in this race, I think you mentioned the 4-horse, Take the 101. I do think he'll be forwardly placed there, and we'll be sitting off his hip there. And you got to look at the 3-horse at 7-1 right now. You got the hottest jock around, Flavian Pratt, and he's jumping on this horse out of Michael McCarthy's barn. And Mike McCarthy, he's been so hot over the spring. Obviously, he won the big race out at Oaklawn Park, and he's been hitting that, I think, about a 25% clip since we started back last week. So his barn is on a heater right now.
All right, and I see the message there from Tom Oak, who Christine Blacker, of course, she, on behalf of TVG, she's their rail side and interviewed, which is a great aspect of what TVG has been able to provide, that on-track coverage. And Victor said that the Tiz had good energy. I'm quite pleased as to how well he's looked out there on the racetrack. Joe Moran, I know you're playing this race. What's your approach? What's the best way to make money on a horse that's now even money favorite?
Yeah, I mean, that's always tough. Similar to Joe, I'm always a pick 4, pick 5 type player, and that's kind of how I play my races on a daily basis. If I was looking in here and I wanted to use Tiz, and I would key him on top, whether that's in an exacta, a try, or I know as you, Superstar Fecta over there would probably key him on top in a Superfecta. So I think that's where you got to create your value. You got to find some prices underneath to run second and third for you in those bets. And you can still do that with keying an even money shot up top.
My approach to this race would be to play exactas, and I would be cluing in on the 1, El Huerfano. I like this spot for him. He's done well at Santa Anita. He's been in the exacta 12 of 21, and I think he's got forward speed. And the one thing about Take the 101, I guess the message that we saw earlier in regard to the front bandages, this horse added the front wraps 2 starts ago. You see double layoff lines. That concerns me. He's a play against. I'm all about Tizamagician, and I'm sure we all are. It's showtime, ladies and gentlemen. Tizamagician heading toward the starting gate, looking to get his second career win and career start to number 8. We're excited. We want to thank each and every one of you out there. I know that there are over 6,000 invitees. We appreciate you, and thousands of partners. Let's get lucky. It's Tizamagician time here. Your watch party. It's My Racehorse. Hoorah.
Good luck.
Post time. They're loading in the gate for the 8th. Boogaloo and El Huerfano. Boogaloo going in. Heart full of stars. Elmore will be next. Working on Boogaloo and Platinum Equity. Be the last one to load. We're in the gate, and they're off. Tizamagician bounces out quickly. Nolo Contesto asked for early speed and responds. These two head and head and take the 101, comes through along the inside. The pace very honest into the first turn. They're followed by Heart Full of Stars in fourth. Passed now by El Huerfano, fourth, and 4 lengths off the lead. Boogaloo is next. Kyle Moore in the lime colors has 7 lengths to make up. Platinum Equity is just outside of him. It's a big gap to Canyon Crest, and Starting Block is at the back of the field. A contested opening quarter mile, and now Take the 101 leads by 3/4 of a length. Tizamagician second. Nolo Contesto is racing in third. Then it's Kyle Moore, 1 from the outside. El Huerfano in hand down at the rail. Platinum Equity outside of him. 2.5 more to Boogaloo, racing on the inside of Heart Full of Stars. Still a big gap to the 2 trailers, Starting Block and Canyon Crest. Take the 101 comes to the 3/8 pole with a 1.5 length lead, doing it easily thus far. The lead up to 2 now, Tizamagician in second. Then it's Nolo Contesto, El Huerfano, third and fourth. 3 more lengths back to Boogaloo, racing on the inside of Kyle Moore. From the back of the field, Starting Block in the red, widest of all, making some progress. Canyon Crest hugs the rail. Top of the stretch, Take the 101 in charge. Nolo Contesto into second. Tizamagician third, followed by El Huerfano and Boogaloo. A 16th to go. Take the 101 still loaded on the front end, and he's in front by 3. Nolo Contesto trying hard, so is Boogaloo. Take the 101 took him all the way. Wins it by 2. Nolo Contesto second. Boogaloo was third, then Tizamagician and El Huerfano to complete the super high 5.
All right, so we'll take the 101, took him coast to coast, and it was a quarter horse to try and get to the front end, and obviously Take the 101 had running on his mind. A disappointing race of sorts from Tizamagician. And Joe, Mischief, what's your first take on the effort from Tizamagician?
Well, to me, it was right as I drew it up in my head. Not the outcome, obviously, but thought Take the 101 would go. We were sitting there, and unfortunately, Tizamagician just didn't have that other gear today that we were hoping. And he'd been training well into the race, but when I don't want to throw the Dubai excuse in there because you got to run races, and it is what your record is, what it says you are, right? But sometimes horses give you false signs of when they go over to Dubai. That race takes a lot out of them. Granted, we didn't run over there, but he had a long trip, so maybe that had to factor into it. Obviously, they can't talk to us, so it's hard to know for sure. But obviously, we're hoping for a win here.
Yeah, I think when you look at the fraction, they went 20. I think they went 22-4, 46-1. Pretty honest fraction. So I'm going to take nothing away from Take the 101. He came to play. Michelle, you had touched on the fact that Annie Harrington had given that horse A- work. But do keep in mind, again, I was a play against on Take the 101 just for the sake of you've got a 5-year-old that was eligible to come back in this condition. He's a California bred, but he had earned $342,000. Joe Moran, I know that you're probably going to have to get a second job now, try to make up for the money you wagered. But where do we go from here? I guess that's the biggest question without getting the feedback from Mandela. Is this a race that he just purely needed after that 16,000-mile Globetrotter trip?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you can give him that excuse. And we've seen him, get better with time and a consistent race schedule early on in his career. And another aspect to touch on in the race, which I really did not see happening, but Nolo Contesto right on the outside of him showed a lot more early speed early on, putting that pressure on Tiz and Victor really to maintain position early that I think threw a little wrench in the ball, even though we thought he was going to be forwardly placed. I thought that's another factor, getting that outside pressure on top of him there, definitely didn't help us either.
Yeah, I think the biggest take, and I just not sure who the person was that said it, but I think that the fact that the horse comes back healthy, happy, and sound, we live to fight another race. And I think the other point being is that look, if Tizamagician wins today, we'd all be excited. We'd all be looking forward to, all right, what's the next step? But we've also had sidebar conversation in-house in reference to Tizamagician. I'm not going to throw it out there as much as I should say it, but in regards to the turf, Joe Moran, knowing his action and the way he moves, is he a horse that potentially could make that transition at some point?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, it's something that me and you and me and Mr. Mishek have touched on multiple times. The way he travels, he's kind of got that way of a little bit of behind knee action and kind of floating over the ground where you think he would take right to the turf. Not to mention his early pace, it would probably benefit him as well if he got on the turf and getting a little more comfortable up front. So those are angles that you could see. So far, he's done nothing wrong on the dirt, so it's hard to take him off. And I don't think we'll be in a rush to do that, but I definitely think it's something in the back pocket to keep.
Well, we know that obviously Del Mar represents some wonderful opportunities in reference to the 3-year-olds there. But, again, the fact that we've got the Belmont Stakes that's been scaled back to 1 1/8 miles on June 20th, that's probably going to take the Baffert, steamers out of town, so to speak. But look, Tizamagician still has that entry-level allowance. That's why they place conditions on races so that horses can graduate and potentially get through to that next level. But, as we evolve with our watch parties, which I hope we will. And again, I want to thank Spendthrift, MyRacehorse, and of course our boss, Michael Behrens, and Grand Slam Social for coming up, with these ideas, because the interactive approach to owning horses and being partners, to me, is the best, because I see a lot of support coming through. I don't see any boo birds. Tizamagician's slow. I don't see any of that, because the reality is it's a horse race. And we talked about our batting average. Joe Moran, being a former baseball player yourself, in this game, if you're winning 20% of the time, granted, we want to be better than 1 for 8. But at the same time, we know that Tizamagician had maybe a little bit of an underlying excuse, knowing that he took a long trip for a race that he was well prepared to compete in, then had to come back, decompress, and now recompress. So we'll definitely look forward to Tizamagician getting back on track sometime soon. And Hannah, any thoughts for the folks out there that have sent messages in and post-race? Have we got any opinions or post-race thoughts?
I think, to piggyback off what you were saying, I think what's so great about this community is that they continually stay positive, and that's what this is all about. It's about the ride. Of course, not the finish we wanted, but as long as he came out healthy, and it's great. So we've just had really great feedback. Everyone's really enjoyed this, and onwards and upwards, I think so.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Once again, the fact that MyRacehorse was created for the fan to actually be part of a sports franchise, an opportunity that no one has ever done. It's unprecedented. And you have the opportunity to not only invest, but you have the opportunity to learn. And as I look at that effort today from Tizamagician, I'd say to myself, you know what? Did we learn something in defeat today? Well, I can tell you this. You could be even money, but it doesn't guarantee victory. And I think that we'll be back to fight another day. And Candace Curtis and to James Hamill out there, and even my good friend Bill in Phoenix, who messaged in. He's rarely on Facebook, but he has enjoyed the show through and throughout. And, once we get back to quote-unquote normalcy, whatever that may be, I'll look forward to having one of these watch parties at the racetrack. And I think you'd all have to agree that would be a tremendous experience.
Yes.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
For the folks out there, the partners, of course, in Tizamagician, we'll be sending out some updates to you this evening. And I actually thought he galloped out well. And he actually showed he didn't completely and entirely quit in the end. Obviously made a little move inside the 3/16 pole. Physically looked great. Props to the Mandela camp for getting him into race. And once again, a thank you to Spendthrift and MyRacehorse Nation, because without you, the fan, and part of this experience, there would be no us. So thank you for that. And until next time, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Of course, happy Memorial Day to each and every one of you out there, and look forward to seeing you sometime very soon. Have a great night. Happy Memorial Day.